Hello, everybody, and welcome to what I am hoping will be the first in a fairly comprehensive series where I am going to be looking at the hero kit and Nemesis pack for each hero. And I decided that in a effort to try to keep this a little bit relative, we're in the middle of kind of the excitement of X-Men, although I do think to some degree the community is also turning on the X-Men a little bit just because we've had 3 years of it. But to kind of take this in a different direction, I figured I would work backwards. So I did a Jubilee unboxing, which kind of worked as a patient zero for this. And now I'm going to be working on going through backwards all the hero kits. And hopefully by the end, that will mean that I will be able to look at where we were in 2024 and compare it to where the game started in, what was it, 2019? And realize what heroes get now out of the box that heroes back then didn't get, or what Fantasy Flight was willing to give to heroes at the beginning that they've sort of strayed away from now. I have played with a lot of these heroes, so these aren't going to be necessarily a reaction as much as more of like a what is in the pack and maybe a discussion about my feelings about the Nemesis kit. I hope to keep these fairly short and not go on for too long. So first off, we've got Bobby Drake, Iceman. I think a lot of people were excited to have him. I think a lot of people have their opinions. I didn't have high expectations, and while I've only played a couple games since Iceman came out, I don't have strong opinions, although I do think that he's a different hero than I thought he was going to be when we were looking at the preview article. But either way, let's start with Bobby Drake, a 6 hand size, 11 hit points mutant, alter ego with 4 recovery. Bobby Drake begins the game with 6 Frostbite upgrades set aside. And his cool off ability is a response. After you change to this form, shuffle 1 ice card from your discard pile into your deck for each copy of Frostbite in play. We're going to be able to kind of dive more deep into all of this. We'll probably be returning to the hero a lot more than like we might with other heroes. I think there's a lot going on with this that can be commented on, and now that we've had some time with it, that I can kind of give a little bit more of an educated response to, as opposed to what my gut reactions, even when I opened up the pack about 6-8 weeks ago, was. We'll get into the Frostbite in a second as well, but let's see. So Iceman is a 1 thwart, 2 attack, 2 defense hero, or ice traded X-Men. He has his freeze ability, which is an interrupt. When Iceman makes a basic attack or defense against an enemy, attach a set-aside copy of Frostbite to that enemy. He has 5 hand size and 11 hit points. So the Frostbite, okay, we've got a bunch of them, but we'll look at this one here. I don't know why I put 2 of them. So it is, Frostbite is kind of its own thing for this hero. It is an upgrade, Condition Ice, permanent. Attached enemy gets -1 scheme, -1 attack, and a force response after attached enemy activates or leaves play. Set this card aside. So my immediate thought for this goes to the Deathglow with Valkyrie. That's because she's on my mind all the time. I think this is a better version, and I'm trying to think about how the Deathglow works. I think that the Deathglow, I don't have it right on me. But either way, the Deathglow, I believe if the attached person leaves play, like it goes to the discard pile, which is not helpful in that sense. I have some strong opinions about how the Frostbite upgrade works, because my logic, I think this is the part of the hero kit that I think has the most kind of like counterintuitiveness, does not jive with how I would think. So let's just take Sabretooth as an example. Sabretooth attacks. I block with Iceman. Actually, let's even make this the way that I thought this worked. So let's say we've got a Frostbite on Sabretooth. Somewhere where you can see it. I made that mistake with the Jubilee pack opening. I had a couple just bleeding off the thing. So Sabretooth attacks. I defend. He gets a second one. How this works now is that he's got a base of 2 attack. Once everything's resolved, once we've resolved, boost icons and everything, how I thought this worked was this is where we would currently be at. How this actually works is this is where we would currently be at. I think from a power level standpoint, that's fine. I will say that that is the one part of Iceman and the Frostbite that I feel like really brought his power level down for me. And I think also is what changes this cool off ability. I'm not an expert, but I feel like recursion is great, but I feel like this is not as powerful as I thought it would be, because I feel like keeping a Frostbite condition on is a lot more complicated than it kind of seemed like on the tin. That said, that's where we currently sit in August of 2024. I don't think that's going to change. I don't think it needs to change. I just think it's a reprioritizing of how you were going to handle all of this. Moving on from the hero card and everything, we will move into Ice Blast, which is a 3 cost event, ice superpower. So it's something you can get back with the cool off ability. Hero action, ice superpower. Hero action, choose a player, attach a set aside Frostbite to the villain and each minion engaged with that player. Deal 3 damage to each enemy with a copy of Frostbite attached. I think this is super powerful in the right situations. I once again, because Frostbites can fall off so much easier than I initially thought, it's not necessarily as powerful as I thought it was. I think getting a second copy of Frostbite onto the villain is strong. I think the first one is pretty good, but I think being able to neutralize minions for an entire turn can be very powerful. I do think that there's a little bit of a balance, because 3 damage can also kill an awful lot of enemies. So the Frostbite, while great, how do I want to put this? Because I think this is a double-edged sword. You can blank a lot of turns, but then you can also just kill a lot of enemies. Both of those are great. I think that it just contextually, from moment to moment, can be hard. And it makes for... This is a more nuanced card than I think I thought it was at the beginning. And I don't even know what my point is necessarily anymore, but just that I feel like this card kind of wants you to be doing 2 different things. It wants you to be neutralizing attacks and also just destroying enemies, which are both good things. I don't know where I necessarily land. I don't know why I'm getting so hung up on this, but I feel like my natural reaction is I thought this card kind of helped to weigh the villain down and weigh enemies down. And then it has the upside of like defeating a bunch of minions, which I don't know, like something about it just screams kind of going in 2 different directions. And we've got 2 copies of Frozen Solid. It is a 3 cost upgrade, ice condition. Hero form only, attached to the enemy, max 1 per enemy. When attached enemy would activate, discard Frozen Solid instead, then attach a set aside copy of Frostbite to that enemy. I think, like Webbed Up, this is a really awesome card to have, and it's really great when you can sort of chain them together. It may not be the most optimal thing to do, but if you happen to get one Frozen Solid and then draw into another one, you can slow the enemy down so much that it kind of trivializes the villain. And if you have a really problematic minion that you're worried about, it can also slow them down. I guess I can't think of a problematic minion that I would want to prioritize stopping them over the villain, but they probably exist, because there's probably... I want to say Mystique. Mystique is probably a minion that, because I need to get through her, I would rather just stop her in her tracks. Because this is off the cuff, I'm probably saying things that like could be better articulated. But either way, I think this is a solid card, and I think that it is... don't sleep on this card. Next up, we have 3 copies of Chill Out. 2 cost event, ice superpower thwart. Hero action, remove 3 threat from a scheme, attach a set aside copy of Frostbite to an enemy. I feel like this does a lot of work. Once again, I as I said in previous videos I've made, I'm not someone that min-maxes, so I'm not going to sit here and say like, well, 2 for 3 threat is, this percentage and it's not that great. I think anything that removes more threat than is going on in a single player game, once a main scheme is accruing one threat and you take off two, was that the best use of your time? Maybe not. But does it buy you an extra turn in terms of the threat? Yes, and I think that is important. Getting a Frostbite onto an enemy, also good. And once again, it's something you can get back with the cool off ability. Got 2 copies of Snow Clone, a 2-cost ally. Has basically cannot thwart, got null for thwart, 2 attack. Upgrades cannot be attached to Snow Clone, and Snow Clone takes -1 consequential damage when it attacks an enemy with a Frostbite attached to it. I love these allies. And they're also traded with Ice and X-Men. I really like these. I feel like they are an extra 2 damage. They're Domino's pistols for Iceman, and I think that they're great. I understand that they can be weak. I understand that you sort of have to sequence everything so that there is a Frostbite attached. I think my misunderstanding about how Frostbite worked and the fact that it melts off immediately did recontextualize this, but I think that these are great, and I'm okay with the fact that they can't get attachments, because you know what? They can still get a tough status token, and that's fine with me. This may change over the course of this series. One of my favorite signature allies. We got 2 copies of Artic Attack, a 2-cost event, attack, ice, superpower. Hero action, choose 1, deal 4 damage to an enemy and attach a set-aside Frostbite to them, or deal 6 damage to an enemy with a Frostbite attached. Not the best attack, but it's versatile, so I can appreciate that. I feel like for the most part, this is 2 for 4. Once again, if you sequence everything, this can be a bigger attack. It's not a swinging web kick, and that's fine. It doesn't need to be. And yeah, just overall, I think this is probably a good example of when people say that Iceman's Kit is a little overcosted. I do feel like 3 cards for 4 damage is kind of, below the curve. 3 for 6 is probably right on the curve. But I also think that you need to be looking at what else is going on here. Because if you already have a Frostbite and you can do the 6, that means that you're already lowering the attack. If you're only dealing the 4, that means that you get the upside of lowering an attack that wasn't augmented at all. And I feel like that is not to be understated. This does actually bring me back to something that I didn't talk about. I didn't talk about his stats here, which I do feel like the way that his ability is set up, you're not going to be thwarting that often, which I guess also does mean that you can be critical of Chill Out. This is the way that he's going to be thwarting, and it is a little on the weak side. But at the same time, I might be a little too much into Miss Marvel when I am kind of forgiving of stats like this. But when he is blocking, he has essentially a base 3, which is kind of nice. And the 2 that he's attacking with, it also means that you're kind of draining an attack from an enemy anyway. But yeah, I guess overall, what was I going to say? I don't even remember now. And then we've got a couple of one-ups. We've got Ice Slide, which I think is an amazing card. It is a 2-cost upgrade, Ice superpower. Iceman gets +1 thwart, +1 attack, and +1 defense, and gains the aerial trait. After you change to Alter Ego form, shuffle this card into your deck. I want this to be better. I think, but the thing is, I think to be fair, with every hero, you want every card to be better. Like, you can always sit there and critique basically any card, and I think this is actually really, really sweet. If you can get this at the right moment where you do not plan to go to Alter Ego for a while, this is great. And the fact that it shuffles back into your deck should not be overlooked either. This could just be discarded. And I think in a different world, it might have been designed that way. But I think the fact that it can be shuffled back into your deck, maybe you can even set it up in a situation where your deck is thinned enough that you're probably just going to draw back into it. So not only have you drawn more cards, maybe recovered because you needed to, or just avoided an attack that looked like it was mounting, but this might not be gone for too long. And I think that should be at least recognized. Next up, we've got Cryokinetic Perception, 2-cost upgrade superpower. Hero response: after you resolve your freeze ability, exhaust this card, draw 1 card. If that card is an ice trait, ready Iceman. I think the fact that this draws you a card in general is good enough. Being able to ready Iceman, especially when you use this, when you're using the freeze ability on a defense activation, I think is a great upside. Just drawing that extra card, if I've learned anything from other heroes, card draw is so awesome, and when you can get it, you take it. And we've got Power Belt, a 2-cost upgrade item, which you can then get with Shopping Spree. Tech, which I guess you could discard for, what is that called? Repurpose? Don't necessarily know why you would do that in this case, but there's a chance for anything to happen. You get +3 hit points. Hero resource, exhaust Power Belt, generate a wild resource for an ice card. So let's see here. Real quick, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I believe by my count, we have 13 ice cards in his kit. That's an awful lot of things to hit. I think when you're looking at something like I was going to say hone technique, that's not the word. The card that generates, the reduces the cost of superpower. Deft Focus. When you're looking at a card like Deft Focus, I want to have 7 or 8 cards that it can hit. This clears that. It is a type that you care about. It is a type that you will be able to recur. And while, yes, sometimes you will find yourself not being able to use it, it does still give you 3 hit points. And you know what? In X-Men land, 14 hit points is pretty good. They're not giving that away. Last card is Ice Wall. 4-cost support. Force Interrupt. When an identity would take any damage from an enemy attack, place that damage here instead. Then, if there is at least 8 damage here, discard this card and attach a set-aside Frostbite to that enemy that just attacked. I think the fact that this can negate more than 8 damage is great. To be realistic, I think the fact that you're going to suddenly find yourself with 7 damage on this and then negate another 7 is probably a little lofty, although Juggernaut is very capable of doing that, and so it should not be understated. This card is nice to have. It's not the first thing I'm going to be looking for. It's not the first thing I'm going to be playing, but it is a card that, having played with it once or twice, does make a difference. So, since I'm doing this impromptu, I will say, this is an easy one. Okay. I think it's probably something that I will be doing is highlighting the card I like the most. I like Snow Clone the most out of all the cards in this in Iceman's kit. I think that it does not take consequential damage so much more often than you might think it doesn't. I feel like I said, I feel like when you have both of these are comparable to having Domino's pistols, and I love Domino's pistols, so I love this. I love these 2 cards. Moving on to the obligation. How are we doing on time? Oh God, I'm sorry. I'm stretching this out so much. Hot-headed obligation. Give this to the Bobby Drake player. Force response. After you attach a Frostbite upgrade to an enemy, take a damage. Alter Ego response. After you make a basic recovery, discard this card. I like this as a different design than it. It really plays into negating what Iceman's doing. And has some consequences. I like that it wants you to do a basic recovery. That's different than just exhausting your hero. I think that overall this is a soft obligation, but I feel like it also really can be a pain when you are just trying to do your thing. So I think this is a good obligation. I don't think it's maybe the best obligation for any hero, but I think it is very thematic, and I enjoy it for that. Lastly, the Nemesis suite. We have Pyro, a 4 health minion with 1 scheme, 3 attack, has quick strike, and Pyro's attacks deal indirect damage. So I think this is thematic. I think it's also an interesting thing for the a minion to be able to do. Because the 3 attack is a lot to have indirect damage. And just to be clear, indirect damage means that I can spread out that damage amongst any number of characters. Can't go over the amount of health that they have, but basically in an instance, I can put 2 damage on Snow Clone and 1 on Iceman. I can put 1 on Ice, or I can put 2 on Iceman and 1 on Snow Clone when Pyro attacks. I know indirect damage is something that I'm not necessarily great with, and I wanted to make sure I had the rules in front of me before I spoke. But yes, can basically it deals 3 spread damage. 2 copies of Burn. When revealed, discard the top 2 cards of your deck. 3, instead if Pyro is in play, take 1 indirect damage for each resource icon discarded this way. Overall, I think this is it is 2 spread damage most of the time. Sometimes it's going to be 3. The moments when this is more than 3 is a lot of damage to account for. I think if you've hit Shadows of the Past, or you flipped over Pursued by the Past, and suddenly this is somewhere around, you need to be very mindful of what your health looks like, because it could get disastrous very quickly if you're not somebody that has allies just sitting around. We've got the Side Scheme, Playing with Fire. Has an acceleration icon and 3 threat. When defeated, the player who defeated the scheme discards the top 3 cards of their deck and takes 1 indirect damage for each resource icon discarded this way. I'm fine with this being 3 all the time, because it is pressuring you to get rid of it. Sometimes an acceleration icon doesn't mean anything, but when you're going in to defeat this, you know what you're doing. You know that, okay, I'm going to have the resources or the allies around, the characters around, to be able to handle this, and this isn't going to come by surprise. Sometimes you kind of need to take the knee and be the person that takes what could be 3, could be 5 damage, and that's just what it is. That's part about being a team. Lastly, we have Pyro's Flamethrower attached to Pyro. Otherwise, this card gains Surge. So this will not be attached to the villain, will not be attached to other minions. It will just be attached to Pyro. I think that's important to remember. It gives +0 attack, but the force interrupt of when Pyro attacks you, discard the top card of your deck. He gets +1 attack for each icon resource on that card. So overall, we see a theme of caring about resource icons that I think is thematic and cool for Pyro. And this is a attachment that I don't know that I'd necessarily be worried about, but certainly is something to keep in mind, and kind of gives you a reason to want to get Pyro off the table. I know Surge can be scary, but I think this is a potentially scary weapon if it's just kind of like left to its own devices. So overall, looking at Iceman, we have a hero that I feel like is probably like a solid B. Not my favorite hero. I love Snow Clones. I love what's going on here. I think that he's a great role player and a great multiplayer role player. I don't know that I necessarily love Iceman as a solo hero, but maybe time will tell. Until then, if you enjoyed this kind of content, I absolutely believe that a tide raises all ships. If I'm gonna make it, I want to make everyone make it. Who's that? Nipsey Hussle, I believe, was I'm going to raise the community up. So if you like this kind of content, and I don't want to take anything away from other places, so if you like this kind of content, especially like the Nemesis kits, go listen to Critical Encounters. If you like card analysis, go listen to The Winning Hand. So until next time, when I will be looking at Magic, what can I improve with? What would you like to hear insight-wise about these kind of cards? Is there some other thing that I should be paying attention to? And what are your impressions of Iceman? Until then, thank you and have a great day.